there was loneliness in his life. There was solitude in his life. And I have found over the years that solitude and loneliness actually affect the Christian, because we're different from the rest of the world, that oftentimes we feel like we're alone. And Jesus showed us that we can live in that solitude, in that loneliness, and still be faithful to God. Stop and think about the fact that there are two kinds of solitude. There's the isolation in space. There's also the isolation of the spirit. Isolation of space is like being out on the lake fishing, and you're the only one out there. Or the mountain climber sitting by himself in his camp. The person who's in prison, who's in solitary confinement, so he's by himself. Isolation of spirit, also known as loneliness of the soul. This is possible even when you're around a whole lot of people. Have you ever felt like you're alone, even though you're in a crowd? Have you ever been like the psalmist who said, "No man cares my soul"? There's no one here who understands, who cares about me, who thinks about me. Have you ever felt like nobody appreciated you? Oftentimes, hands can touch our hands, but they send an icy chill of indifference deep within our hearts. You ever had somebody say, "How are you?" and you start to tell them, and you can tell they zoned out, and they really don't want to hear what's wrong with you? And sometimes people look into our eyes, but with a look that basically says that they're not interested. They don't peer into our hearts. They just kind of observe who we are and not what we are. Sometimes we talk with our lips, but come back like an echo of solitude, without any response, without any reply. Husbands, we need to be careful that when our wives talk to us, we need to actually listen to what they have to say. It's a terrible thing when you're called on the carpet and say, "What did I just say?" And you know you heard the message go in this ear, but it didn't actually take up residence in your brain and just went right out the other ear. So we need to be careful.
Wives have to be careful of that too.
Yes, they do. Our Lord, during his ministry on earth, actually experienced both these kinds of solitude. But that which touched him most was isolation of spirit, where no one seemed to really care about him. People that did not understand him. People did not appreciate him. So let's talk tonight about the loneliness of Jesus. Let's look at the reality of it. Turn over to Luke chapter 2. Verses 41 down through verse 50. In this particular passage, we see that Jesus' parents did not understand the mission that Jesus was here to do. Somebody read Luke 2, 41 through 50.
And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the baby leaped in her womb. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit.
Are you in Luke 2? Luke 2, 41?
Luke 1. Let me flip over here. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be at my father's house?" And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them, and went down with.
That's good.
Oh.
So you would think that after the angel appeared to Mary, after the angel appeared to Joseph, and revealed to them that this was the Messiah, that this was the one who was born for the purpose of taking God's message to all the world, you would think that they would actually have zeroed in. However, I'm sure they were terrified to have a 12-year-old that was not with them. Yes, ma'am?
Something like that's what I was going to say. They were still his parents. He was still just a 12-year-old boy.
Yes.
And nothing, there's not a thing in the world couldn't happen to
Sure.
12-year-old boys today.
Sure.
And of course, what kind of parents would they have been if they hadn't been upset?
Mm-hmm.
So, and when that happens, sometimes when our mind goes into that mode, we're not really thinking about anything. We've got to find that boy and be sure he's safe.
Sure. In John chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, we find that Jesus' siblings wanted nothing to do with Jesus. Notice what he says. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. So his brother said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed him. How do you think that would have made Jesus feel? That they grew up with him. They knew Jesus was a special individual. They had seen the things that he was doing and the things that he was about. And they didn't believe. They didn't see Jesus as the special prophet of God. How about Mark chapter 6, verses 3 and 4? This is his hometown. They were offended by him. They didn't want anything to do with him. Notice what he says in Mark 6, verses 3 and 4. Somebody read that for us.
Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph, and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him, and Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown, and among his relatives, and in his own household."
How would you feel if your brothers, if your mother and father, if your hometown didn't want anything to do with you, but they saw you as this unusual person, and they didn't want anything to do with you? It was during his ministry, though popular for a brief period of time, on the whole, most people rejected Jesus. In John chapter 1, verse 11, it says, "He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him." In Matthew chapter 23, basically the same thing. "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent out. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing." So Jesus was used to being rejected. He was used to being set apart from everyone else. Nobody really had much to do with him. Even those that were closest to him in his family had nothing to do with him. The loneliness of Jesus. Let's talk about his lack of acceptance. I wonder why. Have you ever wondered why Jesus' cousin, John the Baptizer, was accepted, widely accepted, while Jesus was rejected? Why do you think there was a difference? John the Baptist, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think people can accept more of someone telling you about someone than someone saying, I am the one.
Yeah,
Just
that was a lot with the Jews. It seems like John the Baptist.
respecting, you know.
Yeah,
They just did. And then when Jesus said, I am what he.
right.
Yeah.
John the Baptizer actually fit the mold of religious people of his day. He was a Nazarite. He shunned wine and strong drink. He stayed out in the wilderness. Thus, he was really no threat to the positions of those who were in power and those who had great influence. The so-called respectable religious people shunned Jesus. Jesus actually told people that these folks are fake. These religious leaders are fakes. They're not really what God wants them to be. When Jesus, everything that they said about John the Baptizer, Jesus was different. To them, Jesus was a glutton and a wine bibber. Luke chapter 7 and verse 34. You can't please some people. Though from humble means, Jesus claims to be king, just like Terry was talking about. The Pharisees could not comprehend how Jesus could condemn sin and then eat with tax collectors and sinners. Luke chapter 15 and verse 2. To them, Jesus' life was inconsistent with everything that they knew about religion of the day. Even though the religion of the day was perverted by those who were in power. So let's talk for a moment about the loneliness of Jesus in the garden. In Gethsemane, we find the man who was of sorrows, acquainted with grief, Isaiah 53 and verse 3. Remember, in Gethsemane, Jesus prayed 3 times, and each time he went to his disciples for sympathy and encouragement. What did he find? They were asleep. He rebuked them kindly, even though they were sleeping from sorrow, Luke 22:39 through 46. The last time that Jesus came to his disciples and found them sleeping, he told them, just stay asleep, just stay asleep. And it was no longer possible for them to really be of any help to him anyway, for the hour of watching and praying had passed and the enemy was at hand. So at the very hour that Jesus needed people the most, he was the most forlorn. He was the most rejected. Let's talk about the loneliness of Jesus when he was forsaken, even by those 12 that he loved so much. John says in John 16:32 records Jesus saying, "Behold, the hour is coming. Indeed, it has come, when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me." The apostles forsook him, even though they promised that they would never leave him. In Matthew chapter 19 and verse 27, Peter said in reply, "See, we have left everything to follow you. What will we have?" And they had been ready and willing even to die with Jesus. I remember Thomas said, "Let's go with him so that we can die with him." He stated that they never would. Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." But yet, what did he do? He was scared to death. He struck out at those who had arrested him. In John chapter 18 and verse 10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So at the very hour that Jesus should have been able to lean on his chosen 12, they were not there. In fact, we soon see that they had departed each back to his own home, for they were terrified of what was going to happen. Let's talk also about the loneliness of Jesus at judgment. The Jewish council, in an illegal trial, they had condemned Jesus. Let's turn over to Luke 22, verses 54 down through verse 62. Luke 22, 54 through 62. It was during these trials, was when Peter, who had followed far off, denied that he even knew Jesus. So somebody read that for us. Luke 22, 54 through 62.
Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man was also with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
Can you imagine, or what would you think when Jesus turned and looked at you after you had denied him just exactly like he had prophesied that he would? How do you think that would make you feel? Man, that had to have been devastating both to Jesus and to Simon. But Jesus was alone. There wasn't anybody to stand and plead his case at that point. He was alone while he was being judged. You know, since the Romans did not allow the Jews to execute criminals, the council sent him to who? Pilate. And Jesus stood alone as Pilate determined whether or not he should live, as the crowd shouted what? Away with him, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate washed his hands of the matter, and he delivered Jesus to be crucified. Nobody stood up and said, he's innocent. And all of these people that you brought in to bear witness against him, they're telling lies. Everything that you're saying is false. But then let's think also about Jesus being alone at the cross. He's been forsaken by man. And Jesus faced the cross on his own. It's sad to die, but the one who dies alone is truly to be pitied. While on the cross, Jesus even cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27 and verse 46. How alone could you feel to know that God had turned his face? The one that he loved the most and loved him the most, and yet God could not view what was going on.
It was all sin.
Yeah. The loneliness of Jesus was really his motivation. What was the motivation to keep going even though there was no one there with him? How did he remain faithful when he didn't have anybody to spur him on to love and good work? How could Jesus go on in the face of rejection and loneliness? Well, he knew he was never really alone. I love John 16 and verse 32. Jesus says, "Behold, the hour is coming. Indeed, it has come, when you will be scattered, each one to his own home, and will leave me alone. Yet I'm not alone, for the Father is with me." Another thing that will help us is to realize that being accepted by people is not the focus of our life. And that's what was in the mind of Jesus. He wasn't here to please people. He was here to please the Father. In John chapter 6 and verse 38, Jesus said, "I have come down from heaven not to do my own, but the will of him who has sent me." So it didn't matter that he had no friends as long as God was the focus of his life. He didn't need the acceptance or popularity in the eyes of others to make him feel that he was okay. He realized the worth or merit of his life depended on the relationship that he had with the Father and not with the opinions of others. He understood that being alone, when caused by standing for the truth, was not a bad thing. Have you ever had to make a stand that was unpopular with people and have people ridicule you for doing what is right? For choosing God's way instead of man's way. Let me tell you, there's no more lonely time than when that happens. I remember, I think God kind of stepped into my life as a very young person to help me for the latter years, the years that after I became a preacher. My parents would not let us go to pep rallies or places where the cheerleaders had too short of dresses and things like that. And so we would have to actually go into the lunchroom and stay out of the pep rallies. And let me tell you, you talk about being open to ridicule. That brought a lot of people that made fun of the Chase kids in high school because of that. And it upset my littler sister so much so that she would just cry and break down and be so hurt that her friends that she loved so much and cared so much about didn't defend her. It really bothered her. It didn't bother me so much. I was kind of a weirdo anyway. It didn't bother me if people liked me or not. But it did bother my sisters a lot. And I think that helped me to realize that I'm not here to fit in with this world. I'm here to please God. I'm here to tell the truth, no matter whether people are like it or not, whether it offends people or not. I'm not saying that I'm to be mean-spirited. It's helped me through a couple of church splits that I've been through to go ahead and preach the truth, even though the people didn't like it and threatened me with being fired and even being fired on occasion for standing for the truth. The loneliness of Jesus. What is our assurance that we can make it through no matter what happens with people judging us? The number one thing is to know that the Lord is by my side. Look at Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. This is one of those passages that every preacher has got to have, and every church member needs to remember as they face the world. And I think more so right now in our life, because the world is so dead set against Christianity. What's he say? Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. One of the reasons that God has given us the local church is that no matter how isolated we are and we feel in the world, we do have those that are concerned about us, that love us, that understand us, that appreciate us, and who are willing to share themselves and their lives with us. Where would we be without brothers and sisters in Christ? You know, when our family abandons us because we take a stand for truth, that really hurts. But we have a greater family in the family of God. I like that song, we're part of a family. The family of God. We also need to realize that our self-worth does not depend on the opinions of others, but it depends upon my relationship with the Father. And I'm so glad that God has given us the Bible. I love the book of Psalms. The Psalms has helped me through a lot of struggles that I've had in my life and the aloneness that I have felt. I go and I find that David was very much so rejected and even hunted. His life was in danger, and yet he remained faithful to God. I think of Joseph. I think of how his brothers hated him so much that they really wanted to kill him. And if it had not been for Reuben, they would have. You know, standing for the truth and right is going to place us in company with the finest people that have ever lived, including Jesus. Remember, the Hebrews writer says, when you're persecuted, you join a great host of witnesses who have done just like you are doing at this time. So, I have a couple of questions and then the lesson is yours. Did you ever think as to what you would have done in relationship to the loneliness of Jesus? What would you have done had you been in Jesus' family? would you have been his friend and stood beside him? What if you lived in the same town that he did and everybody else rejects Jesus? Would you have stood with him? Would you have followed him to the cross? Would you have stood with him in the hall of Pilate? I wonder if we would have. Would we have been like his closest friends who forsook him and fled? Here's the rubber that meets the road. You can know right now what you have done by what you're doing right now. So, I remember that old gospel song, I'll be a friend to Jesus. I hope that all of us have that kind of dedication to the Lord, that he is my friend and I'm going to be on his side. Remember the little VBS song, whose side are you living on? I'm living on the Lord's side. I wonder if we're living on the Lord's side. Are we marching in the infantry of Jesus Christ? Or are we going along with the flow of the world and thinking that we can reject Jesus Monday through Saturday and then just make up for it by attending in a church building on Sunday and think that that's going to make up for everything that we're not doing the rest of the week? We can't be faithful just one day a week. Maybe this is a sermon we ought to preach on Sunday morning, right? I wonder if how a husband and wife or a father and child, if you only loved them and cared about them for an hour or two a week, how long would that relationship last? It's a pretty good question. Anybody have something that they would share along the line of how they make it? I know that as we get older, I know that a lot of the people that we may have been close to may have passed on, and there's fewer and fewer people around us. How do you deal with your time of loneliness in the world? What do you do? What comes to your mind?
First thing I remember is there a difference in alone and aloneness.
Uh-huh.
Aloneness is positive, because that's when you meditate
Mm-hmm.
or get things done you can't do, or, any of that kind of stuff, or just rest if that's what you need to do.
Right.
Loneliness is usually negative because we get to feeling down and we tend to be depressed. Depression will come up on us. And, it's good to be able to figure out which one it is so you can deal with it. In fact, aloneness is important for
Sure.
all of us
Sure.
from time to time.
We need that solitude once
But
in a while.
loneliness is not. So I don't know if I had been Jesus Christ, how I would have dealt with it. I know Jesus Christ thought so much higher than I did. I didn't think that I even knew, but that's one of the things that helps me is remembering now, is this, which of these is this?
Can you think of a positive thing that we could do to maybe eliminate some of the loneliness in someone else's life? I know that one of the things that cheers me up ever so often, just out of the blue, I will receive a card in the mail that says, hey, love you, appreciate what you're doing, keep it up. That makes all the difference in the world to me, to know that somebody thought that much about me, that they actually took time to write a card and send it to me. I remember just day before yesterday, dear friend of mine that now lives back in New Mexico, Sister Fran Boren, called me on the phone, and I thought, uh-oh, this is not good, because the only time we communicate is on Facebook. So I thought, uh-oh, something bad has happened to some of her family. And she said, hey, just wanted to know if you were okay. Just wanted to know how things were going. I hadn't seen you on Facebook in a while, and I talked to my daughter and asked her if she knew if anything was going bad with Joe or not. And I said, no, everything is fine, but you don't know how much this means to me that you called me just out of the blue. What a great lady. We think that sometimes we can't make an impact in the kingdom. Oh, we can. Just a card, a phone call, a visit. Those things make a tremendous difference. Praying for someone makes a big difference. There is no greater tool that we have as Christians than to go to the Father on the behalf of somebody that has lived alone or is going through a tough time. It's time for us to pray for them. And then let them know that you're praying for them. That makes a difference too. Anybody else? Sure.
No, I can't say that I've ever experienced loneliness.
Yeah,
I've been alone a lot,
yeah.
but I was not lonely.
Joe,
Yes, sir.
you remember that old song, I'm in a crowd, oh so alone? Cause you don't have to be by yourself, be
No,
alone.
sir. No, sir. There's a video that I saw the other day of a dog sitting by the front door just howling his little head off. And you could tell his heart was broken because there was nobody there for him. And his owner happened to be upstairs and looked over the banister and made a little bit of noise. And the dog looked up and was so surprised and got so happy that there was somebody there. And that makes a difference in people's lives. Maybe we need to howl a little louder so people can hear us when we're hurting. All right. That's all that I have. I'll ring the bell for you, Joel. What is the most alone that you have been? When was the most you felt like you were by yourself?
I think when I was a kid growing up in junior high school,
Mm-hmm.
I was attending, the high school I graduated from had like 2,000 students. And other than me and my two sisters, there was one other boy that was never to go to church.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I just felt like I was so different, I just didn't fit in.
Sure.
And so I was alone a lot.
Yeah. And that in that period of your life seems to be one of the most difficult times to get through, even if you do have a bunch of friends. Roger?
You ever been lost in the woods?
Oh, yes, sir. I
That's-
have.
That's one of the worst feelings ever.
Yes, I have been very lost, and that's a scary thing.
I think Joe, one of the longest long time I've had, except one of your dear friends or one of your parents died in the middle of the night. And the only one you can call upon is the Lord, because no one else does come. But you get this feeling that I'm here by myself. And it doesn't matter, when you have a passing like that, a lot of times nurses don't check on every 2 hours like they do, so they know they're fading. And it gets to be a long night, and the room's dark, and you reflect on a lot of things. But you come back, and as Christians, we come back and draw the sense that as Jesus is never alone, and we're never alone. But you can hurt and ache, or somebody put their arms around you and so tell you that everything's still going to be all right. They're going to be all right. Either way that it comes out, it's those nights that you cry, and you cry for them, and you cry for yourself because you're fixing to lose something. So there's no one there. It's a void that I don't like going through, and I've been through it several times, but it never gets any easier.
Yes.
I think that's when it's real hard, is when someone you love and you see them going through that loneliness. I've had it done, I've witnessed it twice, Roger's mom and my mom. When they can't explain it, but they just have this feeling of being alone, being lost, being whatever, even though they're in their home, it's overwhelming where everything just comes back and hits them that hard. And you don't know who to reach for or where to go. And just to see someone go through that, it's hard, but you just have to give them that love and understanding, and just pray for them, and pray for them continuously and stuff, because some people don't understand it and are not willing to understand why, or it's okay that they have that feeling, and stuff.
Sure.
Sometimes as Christians, that's what we need to know, that it's okay, and we've got to help them through that storm.
Joe, I believe when we come to that point, we place ourselves as Jesus. Jesus was alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. The only one he had to talk to was his Father. No one else was there to comfort him or to hug him. We're in that position as we talk about that. We grow real close and draw to him. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in that situation, I don't pray silently. I pray openly. If anybody walks in, they maybe think I'm bad, but I pray out loud to him. I believe Jesus prayed out loud to his Father that night, that he would humble himself before him on that rock. So we just, the strength that we've gained from that is for the fact that we know there's other people that love us.
Yes.
And it's still going to be with us. It goes back to the first statement. This is why God established congregations and churches, that we love and feast and fellowship with each other and hold each other. As a song, blessed be the tie that binds us, that gives us comfort with each other.
A different kind of hurt is when someone that you've made a commitment to live as husband and wife for the rest of your life, and they forsake you. That's a totally different kind of loneliness than there is, and the sense of abandonment is really, really hard to get past. And we need to pray for those people. There was a preacher in Fort Worth that was at one time the judge over Tarrant County Family Court. And I don't know how many divorces and family disputes that he settled, but he made a statement. He said that the difference between losing a spouse through death and losing a spouse through abandonment or divorce is that when someone dies, there is a sense of closure. There is a sense of, there's no way to bring them back. And that's a terrible, terrible thing to go through. He said, but the difference is that in the matter of abandonment or divorce is that the corpse is still up walking around. And it's a constant reminder of what should be or what should have been. And dealing with that, we as Christians, I know how the Bible teaches on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And for many, many, many years, people look down upon people that have gone through that as if they are to blame, that if they had done everything right, then that never would have been a problem. And that's not always the case. It's not always the case. There are some people that are innocent and nothing that they could have done could have fixed that situation. So we've got to handle with kid gloves that kind of situation. We need to love everyone and to bring them to the Lord and show them that they're not alone, that there is someone beside them. What's your number?
430.
430 is our song of encouragement. We'll sing that, and if anyone needs to respond to the Lord's invitation, we invite you to do that. While we sing this song, stand.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest thing, but only lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, all blessed to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand.
You sing, please.
$736. 736. First and last stanzas. 736. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless waves. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore, Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore. Let's not grow weary in the work of love. Send the light, send the light. Let us gather jewels for a crown of love. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore.
Number 800, 800. 8.
In the story, we are sighing for thee. Beautiful of the ransom beside the crystal sea. Soon the bright moment of dawning, we shall behold the glad dawn. Lean on the Lord till the morning, trust till the night is gone. Onward the soul of the fearful, blessed day we shall live from above. Free from all care, from all pain, forever Jesus is there. We are sighing for thee. Beautiful home of the ransom beside the crystal sea.
$595. 595. Sing to me of heaven, sing that song of peace. From the toils that bind me, it will bring release. Burdens will be lifted that are pressing so. Showers of great blessing for my heart will flow. Sing to me of heaven, let me gladly drink of its golden glory, of its utterly gleam. Sing to me where the shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, sing the songs of all. Sing to me of heaven tenderly and low, till the shadows o'er me rise and swiftly go. When my heart is weary, when the day is long, sing to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me gladly drink of its golden glory, of its utterly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, sing the songs of all.
Any announcements that we need to make? Yes, Terry.
Hey, Joe, just want to let everyone know the church, individuals collected $1,775 to send to Felipe. And then several members did mention, hey, why don't we see if we could get him a used vehicle or something that's better?